So the PFL is back for another season this year in 2025, and that means that I am back bringing the Tapology predictions to the We Want Picks channel. Angelo is always talking about how much he loves the Tapology predictions that I do, and that means that he's absolutely thrilled to have me back on the team for the 2025 PFL tournament. Now this year they've actually changed the PFL tournament from the previous format that they used to run, which in my opinion was quite confusing even for me, who was covering it pretty in depth. Last year they had a points system, they had a playoff system. It didn't really make that much sense and it resulted in a lot of very odd rematches. This year they've simplified it a lot more and in my opinion made the tournament just so much better. It is now an 8-person single elimination tournament. I think it just makes a lot more sense. I think it actually created more entertaining fights in last week's episode, which I didn't cover. Unfortunately, I did have a family emergency, so I just couldn't make the video. But I think that we're going to have another very good card. I'm expecting finishes on this card. I'm expecting pretty fun matchups on this card. And honestly, I am really looking forward to PFL in 2025. So if you've been considering watching the PFL, I think that this year is a very good year to get into it. And it's going to be broadcast on ESPN this Friday at 8 PM Eastern Time. Now, despite me not doing a video last week, I did do an article for the We Want Picks channel, the We Want Picks website, I should clarify, sorry, where I went 7-1 on an 8-fight long card, which I don't think was too bad. The one fight I got wrong, I did try and pick an underdog, got that one wrong, but I'm trying to chase another underdog on this card as well, so hopefully that can come through for me. Aside from that though, you guys already know what's on that We Want Picks website, but if you do sign up, you use the code ARTEM, you will get 10% off your first month of membership, or your first membership that you do choose if you wanted to choose for longer than that, and you do also help out me as well. And I think that's probably all that I need to say. Let's now get into the first fight on this card. The official name of the card, I believe, is called the PFL 2025 World Tournament First Round 2. That's a little bit more complicated than it needs to be. It's the World Tournament First Round for the bantamweights and women's flyweights. Now let's get into it. The first fight of the night on the Tapology belt order, of course, is Marcirley Alves fighting against Vilson Ndregjoni. This is at bantamweight. This should be a striking affair between two guys that do like to strike. However, if someone is going to shoot for takedowns, it will definitely be Vilson Ndregjoni. And in this matchup, he is actually going to enjoy a very big size advantage over Marcirley Alves. Marcirley Alves is 5'4". He's very small for the weight class at 135 pounds and potentially could maybe fight at 125 pounds if that was a weight class that the PFL were to offer. But he does make up for that lack of size with very good speed and very high volume as well. He likes to kind of stand pretty close to his opponents and he just throws leg kicks over and over and over again. He'll throw leg kicks and then he'll throw some boxing combinations in moments as well. And just overall, he throws a very high volume of output. He has shown okay takedown defense in the past. Now it is worth noting he was absolutely dominated in the wrestling by Savajon Kamadov, who was a immense prospect at bantamweight under the Bellator banner and the PFL banner now, of course, where he did show not a very good ability to stand back up. And he also did lose to Luan Lacerda, who's in the UFC now, by rear naked choke. But in a couple of these other matchups, he has shown ability to defend takedowns. And although Vilson Ndregjoni is a striker for the most part, he will also shoot for takedowns pretty regularly. He was getting takedowns against this most recent opponent, Naronha, before he eventually set up a pretty nice head kick KO. That was pretty sick to watch, to be honest with you. And he was getting takedowns against Justice Torres as well, which is a very similar matchup to this one here. In that matchup and this matchup, he had a size advantage. He was getting takedowns early on, but Justice Torres has a very similar striking style to Marcirley Alves, where Alves was throwing a very high volume out there, and Ndregjoni was actually getting hit with a lot of those shots. Now, there is quite a few X factors though in this matchup, because Ndregjoni, I do believe, has more tools to win this matchup. He does have KO power on the feet. He's knocked out a lot of prospects in the past. Ashik Ajim is a prospect that I think of recently, but he also knocked out Mark Gray, who was undefeated at the time too. And I do believe that there is a chance that he could knock out Marcirley Alves here, and there is also a chance that he can take down Marcirley Alves and control Alves for 3 rounds straight. But I am picking Alves just based on the fact that Justice Torres was able to land a very high amount of volume on Ndregjoni, and that is the exact same game plan that Marcirley Alves is going to need to employ in this matchup here against Ndregjoni. So I'm going to be picking Marcirley Alves with pretty low confidence to win a decision, and I do believe he does go out there and get it done as a minus 170 favorite, and it looks like a lot of the Tapology voters are also voting the same. The next matchup in the order is going to be Elora Dana versus Diana Avsaragova. And this is honestly a pretty interesting fight, because when this fight was booked and I was looking into it, before my tape study, I did just think that I was going to pick Elora with a very high amount of confidence, because I've watched a lot of Diana Avsaragova fights in Bellator. Bellator have been trying to build her up as a prospect for a long time now. Very obvious reasons why she is very attractive, but she just hasn't looked very good, like, at all in her stint for Bellator. She fought Ilara, which was an interesting matchup. I'll get to that in a moment. But previously, she would beat these opponents here that weren't amazing using her wrestling. And then against Ilara, she just abandoned the wrestling. And she actually does have very good wrestling. And she fought Lara with a purely striking sort of style. And then she tried to do a very similar thing to Justine Kish, and it just didn't work. Avsaragova is very, very slow in the striking. She also can be very timid if you pressured her, like Lara was doing for a lot of that fight. She does just kind of fade away, and she's also very, very slow. She doesn't have very good reactions, doesn't have amazing movement, and her strikes are quite telegraphed. Now, Elora Dana is not a perfect striker herself. Elora Dana doesn't have amazing technique. She just does pressure forward, throwing absolute haymakers, throwing bombs at her opponents, and then she will try and get takedowns. When she does get takedowns, she's very dominant. She does have very good ground and pound and some submission ability as well. I'm going to be picking Elora Dana in this matchup here against Avsaragova because, simply put, I think Avsaragova is going to crumble to the pressure that Elora Dana is going to bring, just coming forward and absolutely bombing away. And if anyone's going to shoot for takedowns, usually I could say it would be Avsaragova, but in the past she's just completely abandoned that part of her game, which doesn't really make that much sense. So I'm going to go with Dana here. I think that Elora Dana is going to mix it up, and I think that she wins a decision in this matchup. Elora Dana is only minus 160 over Avsaragova, but I do believe that she does go out there and wins a decision. And now we have a pretty tough to predict grappler versus grappler matchup. It's between Jena Bishop and Kana Watanabe. Both of these fighters, as I did say, are grapplers. Kana Watanabe definitely a little bit more of a wrestler, whereas Jena Bishop is a very talented BJJ grappler and is a former world champion in no-gi Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She has managed to find a lot of success in her MMA career. She made it into Bellator, made it into the PFL, got a couple of wins, and also started out her career for the LFA, where she was getting some pretty impressive wins. Now that she's moved up, she has had to take on a very tough level of competition, but a close matchup against Taila Santos is very impressive, and then unfortunately she did just run into Dakota Tchiva, who is going to do that to you. But she finds Kana Watanabe here, and Kana Watanabe, I don't believe, has the striking threat that Taila Santos had, or, of course, I forgot her name. No, Dakota Tchiva has as well. Kana Watanabe, I do believe at one point in Bellator, if her striking was better, if she was a bit more well-rounded, I think that Kana Watanabe could have become a world champion. However, she is very one-dimensional. She does need to rely on those takedowns to win fights. And if you're going to take down Jena Bishop, I think you're going to put yourself in a lot of trouble. And we saw Kana Watanabe just get submitted from a defensive position by Liz Carmouche, where Kana Watanabe was in control in top position, and Carmouche threw up an armbar and tapped out Kana Watanabe with only a few seconds left in the end of the third round. I do believe in Jena Bishop's grappling. She has just fought two of the best women's flyweights on the planet and was able to give Taila Santos a pretty good fight. I think that she can go out here against Kana Watanabe, whether she gets taken down or she gets the takedowns, be able to implement her grappling and potentially work to find a submission. So I am going to be picking Jena Bishop in this matchup here, and to a lot of people's surprise, potentially, Jena Bishop actually is the favorite in this matchup. And now we have Mattos fighting against Jake Hadley. This is, of course, Jake Hadley's first fight since being released from the UFC, and he did leave the UFC in my opinion, on a pretty odd sort of run, because he did go from the flyweight division, he moved up to the bantamweight division, looked very good against Callan Loughran, which at the time, I thought was a good win. I think a lot of people thought it was a good win. And then moved on to fight against Cameron Smotherman, who fought him on short notice, and Cameron Smotherman was able to implement takedowns, was able to also beat him up on the feet as well. And Hadley just kind of showed up and just did not put on a very good performance in that matchup whatsoever. And it was very odd to kind of see that, because he just did what Smotherman did to him, to Callan Loughran, which I thought, and many people thought, could have been a tougher opponent for Jake Hadley to deal with. But nonetheless, he's been released from the UFC, and he now starts to try and write a new chapter in the bantamweight division of the PFL. And his opponent is going to be former Bellator fighter Mattheus Mattos, who, very similarly to Marcirley Alves, has shown some wrestling flaws in the past. However, they were to very good wrestlers. They were to Magomedov, and then Kasumov, who also fights on this card. But when he does fight against fighters that don't have that same sort of level of wrestling dominance, he looks very good. Mattheus Mattos is a very dynamic striker. He's very fast. He's listed at 5'5", so he's going to be shorter than Hadley. But he's quite a well-built 5'5" guy. He's actually quite wide, and he's very quick. He's got amazing kicks. He's also got amazing hands. He can throw knees, and he just overall does set up attacks very well. And if he wants to, he can dive for takedowns himself. Now, his takedowns, in my opinion, look a lot more like rugby tackles than anything, but he can wrestle offensively if he wants to. Now, just kind of like Alves, as I was talking about before, he's shown ability to get taken down and controlled, but to be fair, they were to some of the more dominant wrestlers that the Bellator division does have. I think against Jake Hadley here, I think that if Jake Hadley does not grapple in this matchup, I think that he could be in a bit of trouble. I think out of the two, Mattheus Mattos is the better striker. I do believe that Jake Hadley is the better grappler out of the two, and we have seen Jake Hadley manage to implement a lot of very good grappling in the UFC in the past. He, of course, did it on the Contender Series too, but I do believe that in this matchup, Mattheus Mattos, if he can defend most of the takedowns, get up without getting caught in any submissions like that, I think he can find success on the feet against Hadley. It is worth noting, though, that Hadley does have very good boxing. Towards the end of his UFC run, we were really starting to see that boxing get implemented quite well when he did knock out Malcolm Gordon with those body shots, and he also did end up beating Callan Loughran largely to pretty high volume on the feet as well. I'm picking Mattheus Mattos, though, in this matchup, and Mattheus Mattos is the underdog in this fight. He is plus 112 against Jake Hadley, who is minus 130. So I'm going to go with Mattheus Mattos here. I do believe in the striking of him. I think that he has looked good in the matchups where he hasn't had to fight a dominant wrestler, and I don't believe that Jake Hadley can implement that sort of wrestling and top control dominance that someone like Kasumov or Magomedov are capable of doing. We now move up to Liz Carmouche fighting against Ilara Joanne. I really like this matchup for Liz Carmouche. I believe now she is like a minus 700 favorite, which is very wide. And I think it's quite wide for the reason that she is 41 years old. Now, although Liz Carmouche is 41 years old, I do need to look at the success that she has managed to have in the past for Bellator, and in the very recent past for Bellator, I should say. Because as recent as in 2024, she was able to defeat Juliana Velasquez for the third time. She won the belt in 2022 when she would have been 39 years old. Was able to beat Juliana Velasquez twice in Bellator, then beat her again in PFL, which was some Bellator matchmaking, I can tell you that much. But yeah, I think overall Liz Carmouche has shown pretty good ability, and it's worth noting that she beat Juliana Velasquez all three times in the exact same way, by just taking down Juliana Velasquez and being the better grappler in that fight. And I do believe now that she takes on Ilara Joanne, who I believe is a pretty one-dimensional striker, and genuinely watching her fights, even when she does win, and even though she did beat Denise Kielholtz back in that day when Denise Kielholtz was ranked number 3 in the division, I believe, and then she did beat Shanna Young. She has been lost by some grapplers in the past. Bruna Owen was just a better striker than her, but we've seen Ilara Joanne taken down in the past. And even then, as I was saying, when she is striking, I don't think Ilara Joanne striking is all that good either. Now, I don't believe that Carmouche should go out there and just try and strike with Joanne. I definitely believe that Carmouche should try to wrestle here, especially when you do consider the fact that Liz Carmouche is actually going to have a little bit of a size advantage in this matchup, and that is something that Liz Carmouche never has. Even at 125 pounds, Carmouche typically is smaller than her opponents. I remember her being significantly smaller than, where is she? I'm trying to find her. Deanna Bennett. Deanna Bennett was massive compared to Liz Carmouche. And I do believe that now that Carmouche has a size advantage, the takedown should come, the control on top should come, the ground and pound and submission attempts should also come. I believe that Carmouche should go up there and defeat Ilara Joanne. As I did say, she's minus 725 right now. On one sportsbook, she's minus 600, but I do believe that by the time the fight rolls around, I think a lot of people will probably just have her in parlays and she'll be a big favorite. But I do believe that Carmouche can go out there, get it done. Maybe Carmouche by submission or Carmouche just inside the distance. You could maybe get a pretty good price on that, but Carmouche has shown pretty good finishing ability in the past, and this is a step down in competition from Tyler Santos and, of course, Kana Watanabe, who I was talking about earlier. And now we have a short notice matchup. It is worth noting that there are a lot of short notice matchups on this card. I believe 5 of 9 fights are short notice, and I think every single other fight I'm going to talk about is short notice. Kasumov fights against Justin Wetzell. Justin Wetzell has accepted this fight on short notice as a PFL alternate, whereas Kasumov has had the full camp, and I think that's going to be a little bit troublesome for Wetzell, because Kasumov, he fights exactly how you would expect him to. He's a pretty small, well, he's not a small, he's a big guy for bantamweight, but he's got a very small reach, only a 66.5-inch reach, but it does help him have pretty solid strength when it does come to the wrestling. As I was talking about earlier, he went out there against Mattos, was able to take down Mattos, dealt with some of the very tricky striking that Mattos was trying to implement in that matchup, and ultimately was just able to control and ground and pound his way to a victory. He did the same thing against Josh Hill. Hill offered a lot more resistance, but Hill is a pretty tricky veteran, and before that he was fighting over in Brave and against some other opponents too. Justin Wetzell is a guy that has been fighting for a lot of different promotions recently on the regional scene around the US and Canada. He is a pretty solid wrestler, and I think he's a pretty good striker as well. He just doesn't seem to have like a very large amount of pop in his shots when it comes to the striking, but against Bekzod Usmanov, who is actually a pretty solid striker himself, I thought he looked pretty good. Now, it was ultimately the takedowns that Wetzell was able to implement to get Bekzod Usmanov down to the ground and ultimately win the decision. But Bekzod Usmanov, if you guys don't know, was on The Ultimate Fighter, I believe The Ultimate Fighter Season 31, and it's quite funny, he was actually wearing those Ultimate Fighter shorts in that matchup against Wetzell. Wetzell, as I did say, he comes forward, he pressures, he throws boxing combinations, and he tries to get takedowns himself. Now, do I think it's going to work against Kasumov? I'm going to have to say no. Wetzell, I do believe, is going to have some pretty solid takedown defense in this matchup, being a pretty solid wrestler. But Kasumov, he's relentless, man. He's just not going to stop trying to get those takedowns. Yes, he is a little bit exposed on the feet in moments, but as I said, I haven't seen Wetzell really have that pop in the shots to really knock out Kasumov, and I think to beat Kasumov, you need to be able to defend the takedowns and then be as much of a striking threat on the feet that you can knock him out. And I don't think that Wetzell's going to be able to do that. I'm going to go with Kasumov to win by decision. I think he can control Wetzell here. Wetzell's going to offer some pretty tough opportunities though, but Kasumov as a minus 425 favorite, I think he does get it done, and I think he does win a decision in this fight. We move up to another short notice bout here at bantamweight. This is between Francesco Nuzzi and Mando Gutierrez. I like Nuzzi a lot as a prospect. I do believe that's how you say his surname. It could be Nuzzi, it could be Nuzzi, it could be something completely different. So I'm just going to call him Francesco. Francesco is a sick prospect, man. Like, genuinely, I absolutely loved watching this guy's tape. He is an incredible kickboxer. But man, I'm a little bit annoyed with him, because why does this guy not fight more often? He last fought a year and 8 months ago, where he had an awesome knockout win. Like, this one genuinely made me like gasp aloud. It was such a sick KO. He took on this guy called Farbod Iran Nishad. It was, I believe, a PFL Europe card or something along those lines. and Iran Nishad was trying to take him down. He attempted a lot of takedowns against Nuzzi, and Nuzzi was able to just sort of shake them off, and he was making reads in that matchup. The read he made to knock out Nishad was that Nishad was ducking his head a lot to the right, and then eventually Nuzzi just picked it up, and when Nishad ducked his head again, he ducked too much, and Nuzzi just threw up a left head kick and just knocked him spark out. It was a sick knockout win. Unfortunately, no contest against Mokhtar bin Kasi. That kind of sucks because that was his first fight since actually defeating Bernardo Sapai, who is a pretty awesome prospect that a lot of people are high on. However, that was 4 years ago. This guy's only fought 2 times in the last 4 years. It's quite frustrating, but he would have been a very young prospect back then. I think that against Mando Gutierrez, if you guys are unfamiliar with Mando Gutierrez, when I broke down the Contender Series in 2022, Gutierrez actually did fight against Raul Rosas Jr., and I actually picked Raul Rosas Jr. to win this matchup. And the reason why was because I said in my breakdown, Mando Gutierrez fights the exact same way as Raul Rosas Jr., he's just not as good as doing it. And that's what happened. Raul Rosas Jr. outgrappled him for three rounds. Mando Gutierrez is going to want takedowns in this matchup. He is a grappler first. He does have a couple of pretty decent wins, but he also does have a couple of tricky losses. He lost to Cody Gibson on The Ultimate Fighter Season 31. He lost to Cameron Smotherman, who's now in the UFC. But he did bounce back in Japan against Joji Goto, and it's a pretty solid win for him to have as a grappler. Do I believe that he can get the takedowns against Francesco Nuzzi? I'm going to say no, and I think that Francesco genuinely has impressed me so much. I think he can knock out Mando Gutierrez here. Nuzzi, genuinely, such a sick striking prospect. I wish he was in the UFC. I think Nuzzi goes out there, I think he wins by knockout, and I'm picking him to win by knockout. Nuzzi is minus 310 right now, minus 370 on my bookie. I think that's getting a bit wide, but I think it's either a Nuzzi knockout, and then maybe Gutierrez can find a submission, but I don't think Gutierrez gets those takedowns. I think Nuzzi gets the KO, and I think he's going to be a guy to watch out for because he is so fun to watch, genuinely. And now we have Juliana Velasquez fighting against Ekaterina Shakalova. This is the reason why I had to re-record this video. A little bit of lore, a little bit of background knowledge about this video. This is not the first video I have recorded for We Want Picks on this card. I originally recorded a different one, and then Tyler Santos pulled out and completely changed the card. So Ekaterina Shakalova is now fighting Juliana Velasquez. Velasquez is not fighting Santos. Shakalova was meant to fight someone else. Moral of the story, this is the fight. It's Ekaterina Shakalova fighting Velasquez. Now, I said this in the article, I said this in the video that's obviously now been deleted and disappeared. I worry about the weight cut for Ekaterina Shakalova. This is the first time as a professional she's going to be fighting at 125 pounds, and her last 2 fights against Diana Silva and Aspen Ladd were both at 145 pounds. And the thing about the Aspen Ladd fight is it actually was pretty close, but it was because Aspen Ladd made it close. You could tell between the two that Aspen Ladd was the better fighter. Aspen Ladd was just doing Aspen Ladd things and just not doing anything at all. But to break down that fight, Ekaterina Shakalova did what she does in every single one of her fights. You watch one fight, you've seen them all. What she does is she'll dance around the cage, and she'll show pretty good footwork, pretty good movement. Then she'll just charge in and dive in, throw a boxing combination in close, and then just duck her head and dive out. And she'll do that for 3 rounds. The problem is, most of the time she does that, she actually hits nothing. Aspen Ladd was standing still, not moving her head at all, and Ekaterina Shakalova still could not hit her. It was a very frustrating fight to watch, I'll be honest, on replay, because I was like, oh man, like if Shakalova actually landed any of these strikes, she would have a win over Aspen Ladd, which would be somewhat impressive, I think. But nonetheless, Juliana Velasquez is a former Bellator champion. She was undefeated, but then she did run into probably the bane of her existence, Liz Carmouche, who took the title off her in the rematch, and then beats her in her PFL debut as well. It's not a good time, unfortunately, if you are within the rivalry between Velasquez and Carmouche, and you're not Carmouche. But anyway, this is an opponent that's not Liz Carmouche, so in theory, she should be able to win. Velasquez is a pretty good striker, actually. I think that out of the grappling and the striking, she's definitely a much more better striker, considering, of course, she was out-grappled by Carmouche in 3 different fights, and didn't really show an improvement in any of those sort of matchups, so it kind of just tells me that Velasquez isn't working on her wrestling, which could maybe come into play here against Shakalova, who, despite being listed at 5'2", didn't look that small compared to Aspen Ladd, I didn't think, but Velasquez should be able to defend the takedowns of Shakalova and should be the better striker here. As I said, all Shakalova does is just dive in, throw boxing combinations, and then dive back out. She doesn't offer much more than that. I don't think odds are out because this fight was announced this morning for me. It was announced like 12 hours ago, I believe it must have been announced, maybe a little bit more recent than that, but I'm gonna guess that we're going to have Juliana Velasquez as the favorite because Shakalova was preparing for a much worse opponent. We move up to the main event now. Leandro Higo fighting against Josh Rettinghouse. I'm quite annoyed because the odds are getting wider, and I really want to put Higo in a parlay on my own sportsbook here in New Zealand because I like Higo in this matchup a lot. And my sportsbook hasn't brought out the odds, and Higo has now been bet all the way to a minus 400 favorite right now. And I worry by the time it gets to me, it's going to be unplayable. But Leandro Higo's the pick. I think he wins. Now, let's obviously talk about why. Honestly, Josh Rettinghouse is pretty good. He's a veteran of the game now. I believe he made his professional debut all the way back in 2009. That is how long this guy has been fighting for. 2011 professional debut, 2009 amateur debut. I will correct myself there. And he has fought some good guys. He actually fought for the PFL in the past, when the PFL was, of course, known as World Series of Fighting. He fought Marlon Moraes in the promotion at that time, and then he went on to M1 Challenge, ended up in the Ultimate Fighter Season 29, and since then hasn't really been fighting the best level of competition, in my opinion. Josh Rettinghouse, he's a well-rounded fighter. He's good at everything, but he's not great at anything, in my opinion anyway. His striking's actually pretty solid. He's very well-rounded. He can throw the boxing, he can throw the kicks, he can set up takedowns using his boxing as well, which you always like to see. The takedowns, I think, is actually a little bit of a weakness in his game. I don't think his takedown defense is great when he does go out there and fight the higher levels of competition. And another thing about Rettinghouse as well is his top control isn't incredible either. He can get himself caught in some submissions as well if he's not careful. I do like the cardio though. He can push a hard 3 rounds if he needs to, and that could be important now taking on a 36-year-old Leandro Higo. But the thing about Leandro Higo is, despite this guy's potential weight cut problems, I think that he is a little bit better everywhere when it comes down to this matchup. I apologize for the awkward cut. I am still battling a cold at the moment, and I did just start coughing, but that's all been cut out. Let's talk about what I was about to say. I was about to say that Leandro Higo just recently fought, in my opinion, a better version of Josh Rettinghouse at 145 pounds. He just defeated James Gallagher away from home, defeated James Gallagher in Ireland as well, which was quite impressive, and he was able to win that fight by mixing in some kickboxing and also some grappling as well. In the first round, Higo was setting up his kicks quite well, he was setting up his punches quite well, ended up getting takedowns at the end of the first. The second round was mostly striking, Higo looked pretty good, and in the third round, Higo went out there and was able to take the back of James Gallagher in the third round to win a decision away from home in Ireland. I genuinely do believe that in this matchup, I think Higo is the better striker out of the two, and I do believe he's the better grappler out of the two as well. I think that Higo can submit Josh Rettinghouse in this matchup, so that's why he's such a big favourite. I do believe that Higo's going to be pretty safe everywhere. I do believe that Higo has the potential to find a finish here. I know he's got a lot of submissions, but he doesn't really just go out there and just search for finishes like this. They kind of typically come to him. The Nikita Mikhailov guillotine, he actually dropped Mikhailov with like a very odd sort of leg kick sequence and then got the guillotine very soon after. I do believe that Higo, though, in this fight, can get the back of Rettinghouse. He's very slippery in that sort of area. He can get the back pretty easy, and I think he can finish Rettinghouse here. And what I do believe is a very big step up in competition for Josh Rettinghouse from the competition he's been fighting recently, which, you know, hasn't been amazing, and a step down in competition for Leandro Higo compared to the guys that he's been fighting in Bellator recently up a weight class. Now, the weight cut is going to be a little bit of a concern because, of course, if you guys didn't see the little Tapology sort of scales here, he did miss weight at 135 pounds a couple of times, but let's see if he can make it for this tournament. He's going to need to make it for this tournament, because if he doesn't make 135, he's going to be eliminated and that's going to be very sad for me, because as I said, I want to put Higo in a parlay. So anyway, that is my predictions for this card. I'm very much looking forward to this card, and I think it's going to be pretty good. It is a shame that Taila Santos pulled out, because I really wanted to parlay Taila Santos with Leandro Higo, but I'll see if I can cook something else up, which I'll talk about in the Discord. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in next week's video for the PFL 2025 tournament.